Welcome, I'm Eric Triplett, and today's episode of Ask the Pond Digger, we're going to talk about how to start up a new pond, how big should your pond be, and we're going to talk about pond safety. Okay, I pulled another question from SoCal Ponds off of YouTube, and he says, he's a good friend of mine, he's a pond guy too, so this question is kind of rhetorical for him, but he says, hey, how long does it take to cycle a pond, and what should I do to, what can I add to the pond to help that cycle? Now, I picked this question specifically, even though I already picked one of his questions in one of our further episodes down the line, but because Brandon Smith chimed in really quick and he said it takes 4 to 6 weeks. Now, Brandon Smith is absolutely right. However, I picked this question because I have seen ponds take months and months to cycle when you don't do the right thing. I have customers come in, we get them started up, and if you don't do the right stuff, you can really throw your pond for a loop, and it take a long, long time to do it. I have do-it-yourselfers that build their own pond, and then they're still cycling a long way down the line. The pond's still green, or they're still losing fish, or they can't, the pond's murky. So I want to talk about this. Typically, when I start up a brand new pond, we would have a lot of aquatic plants in there, and we would put beneficial bacteria in the pond every day for a couple of weeks just to inoculate the system and kind of get it kick-started. We would put a light fish load in there, and then we would offer the fish food maybe every other day. And now that's predicated on the fact that it's in season, not in winter. But then you would feed the fish every other day. And then after about 4 weeks, you could add a few more fish and continue on with the process. And after about 6 weeks, then you could begin feeding them daily, and your pond is cycling and maturing, because it takes about 4 to 6 weeks for the nitrogen cycle to work itself out in the pond. If you fail in doing some of those things correctly along the way, you could extend that cycle for, obscene lengths of time. If you don't put the right amount of aquatic plants in there, you're messing up right from the beginning. If you're not putting that beneficial bacteria in the startup to kind of get that thing kick-started and inoculated, you're messing up. If you put too many fish, if you feed too much, if you overfeed, you could extend the cycle greatly. So if you are still cycling and you're beyond 6 weeks, you need to put on the brakes and you need to ask yourself what you might be doing wrong in there. But it is a very, very good question, and I'm glad SoCal Ponds brought it up and that Brandon Smith answered so quickly. So great stuff. With that being said, if you're building a dedicated koi pond, there wouldn't be aquatic plants per se in the pond. So you have to be more cautious along the way, because those plants can help cycle that pond a lot faster. But as I said, in a dedicated koi pond, more often than not, there's not going to be any aquatic plants in there. So it might take a little bit longer, or you have to be more cautious along the way with adding that beneficial bacteria and not overfeeding the pond. Our next question is from Alan West, and he lives in Southwest Virginia, and he just really wants to know how big his pond should be. He already has a fish population, and he plans on rebuilding a new pond, a larger pond, this coming spring. So let me start off by saying this. I want you to build as big a pond as you can. I want you to build it. I want you to spend as much money as you can, as you can comfortably afford to build. And if you can make it a little bit bigger, that's even better. About 35% of our pond construction is removing ponds and rebuilding. Now, a good part of that is taking apart poorly built ponds, like ponds gone wrong, and putting in new ponds. But some of the ponds we take apart are ponds that I've built. I don't like taking apart ponds that I've built. But when the customer falls in love with it and they didn't go big enough to begin with, sometimes that's the only option, to tear it out and make it bigger. So that's my best advice to you. If you really want to save money, you make it as big as possible. But let me take a little spin on this, because when you start designing a pond, you want a waterfall on there, a water feature to the side. Typically, there's like a 3,000 to 5,000 gallon per hour volume of water that looks good to most people. That's that's a sweet spot where most people like it. So if you're going to have a 3,000 to 5,000 gallon circulation system, then you should probably have a 3,000 to 5,000 gallon filtration system, and in turn, a 3,000 to 5,000 gallon pond. That's really a super sweet spot, and I want you to think about that. How can you get 3,000 to 5,000 gallons in a spot in your yard? Somewhere in there is a good spot for a koi pond. It's a great spot for a water garden. It's a great spot for an ecosystem pond. It is really a nice number to be at. So if you can achieve that total gallons on your property, it puts you in a really good place, and hopefully you won't have to tear it out and make it bigger next year, because we have a lot of pondaholics that watch our show. We're going to go to the next one, and this is from T.P.D, and he's on, I don't know his real name. All I know it's T.P.D on YouTube, and he throws on a question. I think it was a great question, maybe a boring question to some, but he wants to talk about safety features around the pond. And I think it's fantastic that we're talking about this. First of all, if we're going to start building, then you start with a hard hat, okay? Then once the pond's already done is where I think he wants me to address. Here's some things to think about. If you have an ecosystem pond, there's usually levels or terraces in the pond that you can walk out real easily if you should fall into the pond. There is, if you're doing more of a koi pond style pond construction, you have deep vertical walls. There should be a spot where you can easily get in and out of the pond, either over by the skimmer where there's maybe a 12-inch shelf where you can pull yourself out. It's even better if you can install some stairs or steps in the pond where you can walk out. Oftentimes when we do larger, deep koi ponds, we'll integrate these giant stone steps so you can walk out of the pond. And I know a lot of koi experts don't like to have obstacles like that in the pond for the koi. They might bump into them. But in the same regard, you got to be real careful and make sure it's safe for if someone falls into the pond, they can easily climb out of the pond. So one thing that you're going to want to consider about pond safety is if you have a pond that is deeper than, say, 24 or 36 inches, then it really kind of falls in some of the categories of being a swimming pool. In our state and in a lot of states across the nation, there's a depth requirement for a swimming pool. So if we're going to go, say, 3 foot deep, we need to pull out a swimming pool permit. And that would include, what we would need to do is have fencing around the pond with a self-latching gate. So that way, if you're in there working on your pond, your hands are full, you let yourself out of the pond area and you you don't come back, that gate doesn't stand open and then neighbor kids can come in and get hurt in there. So you want the self-latching gate, and that way, it closes behind you, and then you have to have a way for you to get out of the pond. Those are really critical things. Now, if you plan on getting in the pond at all, it's really good to think about using an external pump from the get-go and have the external pump outside of the pond so there's no electrical physically in the pond. So that's something to think about too. So although safety could be boring a little bit, I think it's a pretty important question, and I thank you for asking that. We're going to finish with the question of the day. I want to know how long you've been into the hobby. Are you just getting started, or you've been into ponds for a long time and you're really experienced, but you're just looking for more information? Please tell me down in the comments right here on YouTube. And you know how you want me to get you to ask your questions? Just put hashtag #AskThePondDigger, post it on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and I will get to them and hopefully answer them right here on the show for you. Thanks.